Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Mark DeMontis.
And Mark is from the Substance Group. Mark, maybe you could start off by telling me about what the Substance Group does, and specifically you're head of accessibility, well, you tell us because you know better than I do.
Sure. So again, I'm Mark DeMontis. I'm the Chief Accessibility Officer at the Substance Group. We're a full-service experiential marketing company that focuses on accessibility as well. Substance accessibility focuses on strengthening the connection between brands and projects, organizations, businesses, and their consumers with disabilities. So a lot of our focus is on ensuring brands can design products, services, and experiences for consumers with disabilities. This large untapped market.
And that's part of what we're talking about today. BC Building Code has some accessibility changes. You could go into what those are in the first place and how there's apparently been a bit of a pushback from developers saying it's going to cost a lot. And you've got a sort of different take on that. So fire away.
Yeah, I think that, when we think about some of the changes that are being done with the building code on accessibility in BC, there's a lot of concern we're hearing from developers around added costs and some of the misconceptions around accommodations for people with disabilities in terms of rental or purchasing new homes. And a lot of what we're reading about is how these building code regulation changes are taking place to quote unquote accommodate people with disabilities. And I think this accommodation notion is what's really concerning developers, because there's already right now a tough time for developers in the marketplace between the construction costs, inflation, and then of course even selling units right now because from an affordability lens. And so I completely understand where developers, architects, construction is coming from. But I think this is an opportunity to shine a light on this untapped market and to not look at this as added cost, but rather an investment to reach an untapped market, probably the largest untapped market in the construction industry around consumers and people with disabilities. So when we're thinking about how these building code changes are new and they're new not just in BC but even across the country in terms of how far behind building code can be. What some of the feedback that we're hearing is around how developers want to be more inclusive and be more accessible, but they're concerned that this is adding on layers of red tape. And I think that what I want to say to developers is to very much look at this as an investment into a new market. And we're not trying to accommodate for people with disabilities through these building code changes in BC. What we're actually trying to do here is intentionally design adaptable units for consumers with a wide range of disabilities. And as we look at, the recent 2022 survey on disability, right now, individuals aged 15 years and older comprise of approximately 27% of the population in Canada. That's 8 million Canadians, and this number is expected to rise to 40% of the population by 2040. So it's been a long time coming where disability advocates have said, we need to start being intentional about home building. Most people with disabilities, older adults, want to live and age in their homes longer. And most people with disabilities want to be able to purchase a home. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions that I think developers think that accessibility is just affordability, so people with disabilities can receive financial support. But this is there's many people with disabilities, including myself and many others out there who do have funds, who do want to purchase, whether that or buy or rent. But unfortunately, there's a disconnect between the units that are being offered and how adaptable they are for people like me.
What are some of the things that are being required now, and what are some of the things that maybe these guys are worried about cost? What are low cost? I don't know if fix is the right word, but changes they could make to add sort of more malleability to these units so that people with disabilities can move into them.
Yeah, I think a lot of these building code restriction changes and regulations are around um, space.
Hmm.
So it has a lot to do with ensuring that when uh, developers and architects are designing, again, to be clear, new homes,
Hmm. Hmm.
that the space being considered for these homes can be adaptable. So that doesn't mean that the building code regulations are requiring uh, architects and developers to think about, where specifically things are being placed, whether that's a grab bar, just as an example. I think what it's focusing on is ensuring that there's enough space allocated in these adaptable homes in case
Hmm.
someone does have a disability, that and later there needs to be adaptations made. It's a lot easier for this to be done as part of the inclusive design phase than if there wasn't enough space allocated. It would lead to way more costs associated on the retrofit
Hmm.
later when someone does face disability or wants to move in with a disability. It's a lot harder to put in the adaptations on site, lifts, ramps, buttons, and so forth, right? So
Hmm.
this is about ensuring that there's enough space when designing, so that in case needed, these units can become adaptable.
And as somebody with a visual impairment, maybe you could speak to some of the lived experience you have of running into these problems to begin with. I'm sure you have.
Literally,
Well, yeah.
this is these advancements and developments with the BC Building Code are this is a positive step forward for people who have disabilities. Again, the majority of people live with an invisible disability. So for myself, if I'm not using an ID cane, or most people wouldn't even know that I'm someone who
Hmm.
only lives with 4% sight. And so when we think about, well, what does space have to do with vision? A lot of it is around ensuring that there's adequate orientation, wayfinding. When we think about our own home units, ensure proper placement of areas to rest, to live.
Hmm.
Restrooms is the biggest one, around ensuring that things are easily accessed. And of course, when we're looking at signage, that's also a big one. But all this is important, but it's even more important when there's enough space,
Hmm.
and that's why these building code changes have caught a lot of attention, is because again, developers are trying to figure out, how can we do this if we already have enough on our plate to begin with. And as someone who's lived half my life with sight, half my life without sight, I understand the frustration developers are having, and I understand the fear and the concern around this. But I also, again, now living half my life as someone with a disability, I also see the market opportunities,
Hmm.
and I think that that's why I don't want developers or architects to think that this is another layer of red tape. What we're here to do, especially at the Substance Group, is work with developers and architects to ensure that they understand that if this is done properly and intentionally, then that you can tap into, what is now globally, in terms of the disability consumer spend of disposable income, around $13 trillion globally.
Hmm.
So most developers aren't aware of some of those numbers, of what this global disability consumer market, and in particular what the market in British Columbia has. And that's what this is about, is making this fair, equitable, but also, again, not just the right thing to do, but the smart business thing to do as well.
Hmm. Now, I would assume because there's changes to the building code, this is something that is needed to begin with. But what has been happening in, let's say, the last decade or two? Because I would assume there has been some progress from, say, like a building from the 60s, for instance.
Yeah, there's always the issue around, what we call older buildings and older establishments, where there are many clauses oftentimes that prevent these builds to be retrofitted, or to be designed, because there's insufficient
Hmm.
space to begin with. And that's why the important point here on the BC building code changes is around new development, so new homes. To be very clear, We've seen it in Ontario as well around how there's always a clause for, for homes that are for units, and especially on the commercial space, that are new builds versus old builds. And there's a bit of a grandfather clause in Ontario, for example, around that.
Hmm.
And so that's why the emphasis here is around new builds, new homes, and ensuring that these homes can be designed with enough space so they can be adaptable. And I think that's a point to touch on, is that when we think about space, we're not. I think there's a debate over how much space,
Hmm.
and I would say I think that it's not as much space as people would think. It's just the
Hmm.
consideration around a little bit more space, so that the design of, restrooms, living rooms, bedrooms, and whatnot can make it a little easier for people when they do age, and if they do with disability, right?
Hmm.
Um, so there's also added misconceptions now around, well, is this going to cost us? Is this going to cost a lot more? And I always use the analogy, if you're designing a light, if you're designing a space for a light switch, for someone who is, able-bodied, standing, for someone who is using a wheelchair, um, is there really that many more costs when all you're doing is lowering the light switch?
Hmm.
That's just an example that I use when I speak to developers about, and architects about, some of these misconceptions, right? Um, they can seem like there's a fear of cost because this is a new space for the development world. But I
Hmm.
can assure, when by working with groups like ours at the Substance Group and other individuals who have a background in space, you'll realize really quickly that, we have to do a lot of this design anyways. So to be thinking about universal design, it may seem like there's some more cost, but what it's actually doing is saving a tremendous amount of costs in the long run around avoiding retrofits.
This makes me think of awareness. I've interviewed people who design hospitals, and as a layman, they explained to me how the traffic, there's these things are open 24/7. You have to have these traffic lines open so somebody could push a gurney through at any given time. Stuff you don't think about unless you work in this field. So, what are some things that you can bring awareness to developers about that they may not be thinking about because it's not something they've had to deal with before?
One of the things I really recommend to developers, and when I work with them quite often in this space, is most of the times developers wait to engage with community at far too late in the development process. So typically, when a development is getting green lit, or there's a zoning matter, and developers are sitting there and they want to engage with the community to receive feedback. But what's happened is, a lot of the design and the design work has already been, drawings, blueprints, has already been done.
Hmm.
And what we always recommend is for developers, what I call, to be disability intentional, and that's to work with individuals who are from those respective communities where these residential developments are being done, individuals who have lived experience that can provide insights and feedback into the pre-design phase before it's too late. So I often think sometimes we make a lot of decisions and then we receive feedback when it's too late. So what
Hmm.
I always recommend is ensure that developers have an advisory committee on people with disabilities who have a wide range of disabilities, whether that's physical, sensory, individuals dealing with pain, mental health, long COVID, and things that can be and an opportunity where developers can say, wow, there actually are people here with great feedback, great ideas, who do want to purchase, who
Hmm.
do want to rent. And again, it goes back to the misconceptions. Most people think that individuals with disabilities can't afford homes, can't afford to rent, and that everyone with a disability is living on social assistance.
Hmm.
And that's not the case at all. We have to stop mixing up affordability and accessibility. There are
Hmm.
many people with jobs who are employed, who have a wide range of disabilities, who want to live in their home and age in their home like anyone else. And this is the only demographic and market or community, we'll call, that anyone can join at any given time.
True. Yes.
So the people that are the people that are questioning building code changes may not be the same people that have faced disability, call it, yet. But
Hmm.
at the rate we're going, again, 40% of people with disabilities in Canada being expected by 2040. That's not a long time from now, where almost half the country is going to identify with one disability.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I see both sides. I see the frustration from developers. This might seem like a layer of added red tape, but I also see the massive market opportunity here. And if developers have the right guidance and the right support in their initial design phase and in their preliminary phases, even around just financing, there are many ways how this can be not an obstacle, but rather a business opportunity.
Okay, and if developers or anybody else for that matter wants to know more about the subject or about what you do, how would they go about finding out?
Biggest way is log on to our website at thesubstancegroup.com. And you can reach out to me anytime, Mark DeMontis, Chief Accessibility Officer. And you can reach me at mark@thesubstancegroup.com. Again, that's Mark with a K at thesubstancegroup.com. And feel free to reach out and love to hear from you, but also would love to collaborate and work with you, as I'm very passionate about the development space, and we are at the Substance Group. But we also are very eager to shine a light on this untapped market to developers and find innovative and effective ways to reach these audiences.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
No, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Construction Record Podcast. You can hear us on Apple Music, Amazon, and Spotify, as well as at theconstructionrecord.libsyn.com and on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks again for listening.